Franklin Hargrove had nearly stepped on her. He had come out of his bedroom at midnight, moving through the dark hallway of his Des Moines estate toward the kitchen with the specific, unthinking familiarity of a man navigating his own house without needing the lights, when his foot had come down inches from something small and soft, curled directly outside his door. He had stopped, his heart lurching, and had switched on the hallway sconce to find Cora, 4 years old, the daughter of his housekeeper, Marisol, asleep on the hallway floor, a thin blanket pulled up to her chin, her small body curled into the specific defensive posture of a child who had settled somewhere she was not entirely supposed to be. Franklin had crouched down, uncertain whether to wake her or simply lift her carefully back to wherever she belonged, when her eyes had opened, immediate and alert in the particular way young children sometimes wake. No gradual surfacing, simply awake. "Cora," he said, keeping his voice low. "What are you doing out here? It's the middle of the night." Cora had sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around her shoulders, and had looked at him with an expression carrying more weight than her 4 years typically produced. "I sleep here sometimes," she said, "when the bad dream comes back." "What bad dream?" Franklin asked, sitting down properly now, cross-legged on the hallway floor across from her, understanding, with the particular instinct of someone who had learned to take children's fears seriously, that this conversation required his full attention rather than a hurried dismissal back toward bed. Cora had considered the question with visible effort, the specific, careful weighing of a 4-year-old deciding how much to explain. "The one where I wake up and Mama's gone," she said finally. "Where I'm somewhere I don't know, with people I don't know, and I don't know where she went or when she's coming back. I used to have it all the time, when Mama was sick. It stopped for a while, but it came back a few weeks ago, and I don't know why." Franklin had felt something in his chest tighten, the specific weight of understanding, gradually, exactly what he was hearing. "And you sleep out here because," he began. "Because you don't get scared," Cora said simply, as though this were the most obvious explanation in the world. "I remember when the storm happened, and I was scared, and you just sat with me and you weren't scared at all. I figured if I'm near someone who doesn't get scared, the bad dream can't come true again. I don't think it's really about you exactly. I just feel safer near you than anywhere else in the house." Franklin had sat in the quiet hallway for a long moment, the particular weight of what a 4-year-old had just told him settling into him slowly, layer by layer, until he understood, with a specific and considerable clarity, that he needed to hear the whole story before he could properly respond to any of it. "Hey, welcome back, everyone. I am so glad you are here. This is the place for stories about the quiet fears children carry, and the unexpected people who become their anchor against them. Before we begin, I want to know, where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your city and country in the comments. I read every single one, and if you have not subscribed yet, please do it right now, because today's story is tender, and it will make you think differently about what safety actually means to the people who need it most. Stay until the very end. Let's begin. Des Moines carries its wealth with the specific understated confidence of the Midwest's insurance and agricultural industries, the two together having built the city's considerable prosperity across more than a century. Its old money neighborhoods, Salisbury houses surrounding streets in Waterbury and Beaverdale, housing families whose fortunes had been built on the particular unglamorous stability of underwriting risk and moving grain, rather than the flashier industries of larger coastal cities. Franklin Hargrove's estate sat in Waterbury, a large Tudor revival house built in the 1930s on an insurance fortune his grandfather had founded. A business Franklin had, across 2 decades, grown into one of the Midwest's largest independent underwriting operations. Her name was Marisol. Marisol Contreras, 32 years old, born in Des Moines to parents who had come from Michoacán, Mexico, in the late 1980s. Her father working meatpacking for over 2 decades in the city's considerable processing industry, her mother cleaning office buildings downtown, before eventually training as a certified nursing assistant, the two of them building, across years of physically demanding work, a specific stability they had passed down to Marisol with the deliberate insistence that reliability mattered more than anything else. She had trained as a medical assistant at Des Moines Area Community College, had worked several years in clinical settings before her own health crisis, a serious cardiac arrhythmia diagnosed unexpectedly at 29, requiring a considerable hospitalization and recovery period, had interrupted her career and left her, in its aftermath, needing work with more flexible hours than clinical medical assisting typically allowed. She had been managing Franklin Hargrove's household for just over a year, work she valued considerably, Franklin having proven, across that time, a genuinely reasonable and considerate employer. Her daughter Cora came with her most days. Cora was 4 years old. She had her mother's watchful eyes and a specific, formative memory that Marisol had not fully understood the lasting weight of until recently. The 6 weeks, roughly a year earlier, when Marisol's cardiac diagnosis had required an extended hospitalization, during which Cora, then 3 years old, had been cared for by a rotating combination of family members and, on several difficult occasions when no family member was available, temporary childcare arranged through considerably less familiar channels. Marisol had recovered fully, the arrhythmia successfully managed with medication and lifestyle adjustments that had, across the following year, allowed her to return to full health and full-time work. She had believed, reasonably, that the difficult period had resolved itself entirely once her own recovery was complete. She had not fully understood, until Franklin's careful account of Cora's hallway confession, exactly how much of that 6-week period had lodged itself permanently in her daughter's memory. The specific, formative terror of a 3-year-old waking repeatedly during those weeks in unfamiliar rooms, cared for by unfamiliar people, with no clear understanding of when or whether her mother would return. Hit that like button right now, because a 4-year-old just explained, with total clarity, exactly why she'd been sleeping on a hallway floor, and it had nothing to do with protecting anyone, and everything to do with her own fear finally finding somewhere safe enough to rest. Subscribe right now because what caused that fear to return is going to matter enormously. Let's keep going. Why do you think the dream came back? Franklin asked carefully, still seated on the hallway floor across from Cora. You said it had stopped for a while. Cora had thought about this with the particular seriousness she brought to questions that mattered. Mama's been tired a lot, she said, and worried, I think, even though she says she isn't. She works more hours now, and sometimes she talks on the phone in a voice that sounds like the voice she used to use when we were figuring out the hospital bills. I don't fully understand what she's worried about, but I remember that voice from before, and I think my brain remembered it too, and that's maybe why the dream came back. Franklin had absorbed this with a specific, growing understanding, recognizing, with the particular clarity a child's unfiltered observation sometimes provided, exactly what he had likely missed across recent weeks. Some genuine financial or logistical stress that Marisol had been managing quietly, competently, without ever raising it directly with him, the specific pattern of a proud, capable employee absorbing difficulty rather than burdening her employer with it. I'm going to talk to your mother, he said gently, not to get her in trouble, and not because you did anything wrong by telling me any of this. I just think there might be something I can help with, if I understand what's actually happening. Are you mad that I sleep outside your door? Cora asked, her voice carrying a specific worry that had apparently been building beneath the earlier composed explanation. Not even slightly, Franklin said. I'm glad you told me why. I want you to have somewhere safer to sleep than a hallway floor, though. Let's figure that part out together, once I've talked with your mother. Franklin had found Marisol the following morning, catching her before her workday's usual routine had fully begun, and had described, with careful attention to Cora's dignity, the full account of what he had learned in the hallway the previous night. Marisol's composure had held for perhaps 10 seconds before visibly fracturing. "I had no idea she was still carrying that," she said, her voice unsteady. "I thought once I recovered, once things went back to normal, that part was over. I didn't realize how much those 6 weeks had actually done to her." "Children remember instability differently than we expect them to," Franklin said gently. "She mentioned you've seemed tired, worried, using what she described as your hospital bill's voice on the phone lately. Is there something happening I should know about?" Marisol had been quiet for a long moment, the specific hesitation of someone who had made a considerable practice of not burdening her employer with personal difficulties. "My mother's health has taken a turn," she said finally. "Nothing as serious as what I went through, but she needs more support than she used to, and I've been trying to help cover some of her costs alongside my own, which has meant picking up additional hours wherever I can find them. I didn't want to bring any of that into this house. It felt like it wasn't your concern to manage." "It became my concern the moment it started affecting Cora's sleep," Franklin said. "Not because I think it's my job to solve every difficulty in your life, but because I think we're past the point where I can reasonably pretend not to notice what's happening under my own roof. Share this story right now with someone who needs it today." Because a mother had been quietly absorbing genuine financial and family stress, telling herself it wasn't her employer's concern to know about, while her daughter's small body carried that unspoken worry into recurring nightmares, neither adult fully understood until a hallway confession finally connected everything. One tap. Send this to someone who needs to be reminded that the people around us are often carrying more than they let on. Let's keep going. Franklin had spent the following days working through a specific, careful response, not the sweeping, immediate financial gesture that might have felt, to Marisol, like charity rather than genuine partnership, but a considered set of adjustments that addressed the actual practical pressures without undermining the professional dignity she had clearly worked hard to maintain throughout the difficulty. He had adjusted her compensation to a level that removed the necessity of the additional outside hours she had been picking up, framing the change explicitly as a correction to a salary that had, in his own honest assessment, not adequately reflected her considerable value to the household across the preceding year. He had connected her, through his own network, with a geriatric care coordinator who could help navigate her mother's evolving health needs more efficiently than Marisol had been managing largely alone. "This isn't about fixing everything for you," he told her, once these adjustments had been discussed and largely settled. "I understand you're capable of managing your own life, and I respect that considerably. I just think there's a difference between managing something alone because you have to and managing it alone because you feel you're not allowed to ask for support. I'd like you to feel it's the second option, going forward, not the first." "I'm not used to employers who think about things this carefully," Marisol said. "I wasn't. Before Cora explained why she was sleeping outside my door," Franklin said honestly. "I think I'd been paying considerably less attention to the actual texture of both your lives than I believed I was. That's something I intend to correct, not just for this specific situation, but generally." Franklin had also, in the days that followed, developed with Cora a specific, deliberate nighttime ritual designed to replace her hallway vigil with something considerably more sustainable. A short visit each evening before bed, 5 or 10 minutes, during which he would sit with her, ask about her day, and, at her specific request, tell her something true and calm to think about as she fell asleep, a practice she had described, with the particular directness she brought to most things, as borrowing some of your not scared feeling before I go to sleep. "I think I don't need to sleep outside your door anymore," Cora told him, several weeks into this new arrangement, with the particular matter-of-fact confidence of a 4-year-old reporting a settled fact. The dream hasn't come back since we started doing this. I'm glad, Franklin said. Though I want you to know, if it ever does come back, you can always tell me, whether it's in the hallway at midnight or during our regular evening visit. Either way works. I know, Cora said. But I think I believe now that the safe feeling isn't really about being near you specifically. It's more like, you helped me remember that I can find that feeling myself, even when you're not right there. Does that make sense? Franklin had looked at this 4-year-old, articulating something about the actual mechanics of psychological security with more clarity than most adults he knew managed, and had felt something in his chest that he did not immediately have language for. That makes perfect sense, he said, and it might be the wisest thing anyone said to me in longer than I can specifically recall. Right here, a 4-year-old just articulated something profound about the actual nature of psychological safety, that it was never really about being near one specific person, but about learning to trust that the safe feeling exists inside her, even alone. Share this right now with someone who needs to be reminded that real security comes from being consistently shown you're safe, not from proximity to any one person. Subscribe because we're almost at the end. Let's finish it. Franklin had thought, in the weeks that followed, considerably more than he expected to, about the particular weight of what Cora had unknowingly revealed to him, that a 4-year-old had identified him, entirely without his awareness, as the specific psychological anchor she reached for when her own fear became too large to manage alone, and that this recognition had required him to examine, with more honesty than he generally brought to his own interior life, whether he offered anyone in his own considerably more adult existence anything resembling the same steady, unshaken presence Cora had described. He had found, turning the question over, that the honest answer was considerably more complicated than he wanted it to be, that he had built, across years of running a demanding company, a specific professional composure that mirrored, in some respects, exactly what Cora had noticed and trusted, but that this composure had not, if he was being fully honest with himself, extended particularly deeply into his own private life, where genuine, unshaken calm remained, more often than he liked to admit, considerably harder to summon than the version he presented publicly. You gave her something real, Marisol told him, several weeks later, watching Cora sleep peacefully in her own bed, rather than curled outside anyone's door. I don't think you fully understand yet how significant that is. Children know the difference between performed calm and genuine calm. She trusted you specifically because what you showed her during that storm wasn't a performance. It was actually true. I hope it was, Franklin said. I'm not entirely certain I always manage that as consistently as she seems to believe I do. Maybe not, Marisol said. But you managed it enough, in the moments that mattered most to her, that she built her sense of safety around it. I don't think that requires perfection. I think it just requires being reliably true, often enough that a child learns to trust the pattern. There is a particular kind of trust that children build not through grand gestures, but through the accumulated evidence of small, consistent moments. A storm weathered calmly, a difficult night sat through without panic, the specific, repeated demonstration that someone can be relied upon not to fall apart when things become frightening. Cora had built exactly that kind of trust in Franklin Hargrove, entirely without his awareness, across months of small interactions that had, apparently, communicated something considerably more significant than he had understood at the time, that he was, to a 4-year-old carrying genuine, unresolved fear from a formative period of instability, the specific anchor point her own developing sense of security had attached itself to. She had not been sleeping outside his door to protect him. She had been sleeping there because some part of her, too young to fully articulate the psychology of it, but entirely certain of the feeling itself, understood that proximity to steady, reliable calm was the closest thing available to actual safety, in the specific moments when her own fear grew too large to manage alone. You don't get scared. I figured if I'm near someone who doesn't get scared, the bad dream can't come true again. A 4-year-old's simple, devastating explanation for an entire hallway vigil, revealing, in the process, both the depth of a formative fear neither adult had fully understood, and the specific, quiet trust a child had placed in a man who had, without ever intending to, become exactly what she needed most. Sometimes the most profound trust we're given arrives not through anything we deliberately built, but through the accumulated evidence of simply being true, consistently, in the moments a small person happened to be watching. If today's story moved you, please hit that like button right now. It costs you 1 second, and it sends this to someone who needs it today. Subscribe because there are more stories coming. More quiet fears children carry longer than we realize. More unexpected people who become someone's anchor without ever meaning to. Share this today with someone who might be carrying more unspoken worry than they've let on. The way Marisol was, quietly, until a hallway confession finally brought everything into the light. And I will see you in the next one.